on the other side of things, someone who does get into debt and then wants to actually pay it off and not just have it roll off of their, whatever their account, their credit. The first question we have is, this debt is killing me. What can I do? So I'm 24 years old and stuck with nearly 20,000 of debt. 2 credit cards maxed out, totaling about 9,000, about 5,000 in student loan debt, and another 5,000 across a handful of different collections accounts. Some of this was due to bad financial decisions, but a lot of it was from struggling to pay bills while living on my own. I'm making more money now, but it feels like every time I turn around, I owe more money and I can't keep up. I make my payments every month, but by the next payment, the interest piles on and I can't seem to make a dent. I need to get this paid off, but it's starting to feel impossible. I don't have anything in savings and it's been a constant stress on my life. Should I look into debt consolidation? Are there programs that can help? I just don't know what to do at this point.
$20,000 at 24 years old and a good chunk of that being credit cards or in collections. Like that's an unfortunate situation. And I have so much more sympathy for people who are in these tough situations because they were trying to make ends meet and their income just didn't stretch far enough, as opposed to the person who ends up in this place because of just poor spending habits and living beyond their means. But yeah, this is a tough situation. And yeah, I think having awareness of where all these debts are at, like that's definitely step number one. But getting a better sense of how did this really happen? Like, was it truly because I just wasn't making enough money? Like, you got to assess how you ended up in this situation. Like, if it's really because you weren't making enough money, rent had to be paid out of your checking. And so groceries had to be purchased on a credit card like that. Okay. You can understand that. And now if you're making more money, like this person said, okay, we can avoid that moving forward. But yeah, you really got to audit, like, how did this happen in your life? Like, is there a possibility that this happened because you were spending on things that you didn't need to? I think if you can get clarity on that, like that's where what you're going to need to address first, right? That's going to tell you where the issue was and then how to find a solution for that.
Yeah, for sure. Cause I'm like, I get this. Cause whenever I was first out of college, I think I've told you and I've said on here before, but I had to work a full-time job and then my rent was $850 a month and it was a studio apartment. And I was making I'm not kidding you, $34,000 a year. And so that rent was probably like half of my paycheck. And I still had a car payment and stuff like that. So I actually had to work part-time at like a psychiatric hospital and I did the overnight shift there. So I was able to afford my life. So I get this. I totally understand. And it sucks to struggle just to like pay bills to live, But I'm just curious, like, is this person like do they actually know like where their money's going? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not questioning that. I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff going on here, but like sometimes if we aren't paying attention, if we're not budgeting, things can be going out that doesn't really need to be going out. You know what I mean? Whether that's random purchases here and there, eating out, because you're busy and stuff like that. Like I get it, but sometimes I wonder, like, are we being like 100, not truthful, because I just think we just, whatever we're thinking, that's what our thoughts are on it. But like, I don't know. Do we actually know the truth here? Like, was it from actually struggling to pay bills or like, was it just a little bit of like wonky spending, Yeah. You said sort of bad financial decisions, but also like, I don't know. I think there could be a mix of both of those, but probably having a good handle on your finances to start is, it seems like they know where their debt is, but like now, like, where's your actual money going? And then let's start there,
Oh, 100%. And I feel like people think that there's like this threshold to where you don't need to pay attention to the money anymore. Yeah. Like I feel like people think, oh, when I make this much money, then it'll be less important. And now granted, like there can be a point where like, yeah, okay, I don't need to make sure that I stayed within $500 exactly on groceries. And instead I can really just focus on, am I saving according to my goals, and then is the rest of my spending in line? But like at every point in your income level, like you should be paying attention to these things.
Yeah.
There should be awareness of like, at least in general, where is my money going? As you come down levels in income, like you have to pay even more and more attention. And like, we don't know what this person is making. And it sounds like they're making a little bit more money than when they first started, but I'd imagine they're still in the area where they need like super precise clarity over all of their numbers. Yeah. Like into that nitty gritty of like, how much am I spending on groceries? How much am I spending on gas? Is there any unnecessary spending that I could be putting towards this debt? Yeah. Right. Like, and especially when you frame it like this debt is killing me, like you have to have so much clarity over everything. Otherwise, like the debt's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. And so to like kind of answer their question, what should they do at this point? So for me, like we've talked about this a lot too, but like debt consolidation is something that like, yeah, it can be a great option for people, but I also feel like you don't really learn much from it because it just like you know, it can be helpful. It can be a tool to like consolidate your debt into like one payment that's more easy for you to pay each month, whatever. But there's no action there on your part. It's just you're taking the debt and you're sort of moving it together. And then you're just like, oh, I did this. And, you know, I think that that's where a lot of people are when they're in debt consolidation. And we see this time and time again. And then they just end up in the same type of cycle that they're in. So that's something that they could look into. But I feel like, Nick, if this 5,000 is already in they said they have 5,000 in collections, would you just kind of like set that one aside for now and just like focus on like the 2 credit cards that are at 9,000 and the student loans, and kind of just like the ones, 5,000 is already in collections. Like, should they just let that sit there and try to maybe focus on the 15 and try to get that tackled first? Or like, how would you do it?
Yeah, I was a little torn because on the one hand, like they do have, yeah, like you said, the $9,000 in credit card debt seems like to be the most pressing.
Yeah.
And then with the money in collections, like it would be different if they had a couple $1,000s in savings, even like $2,000 or $3,000, right?
Yeah.
Where they could call up those collections companies and say, hey, I'll pay off this debt with this amount, and I need it in writing that this will clear my debt. Because a lot of times they'll take pennies on the dollar to clear your debt because they know, like, once it's gotten to the point where it's sold to a collections company, they've already paid pennies on the dollar. And so maybe you can get your debt like 40-50% off at that stage, but you do need to have cash in hand.
Yeah.
But because it's in 5,000, because that's the 5,000 that is in collections, I would probably focus on the credit cards.
Yeah.
I'd imagine the student loans, like depending on how recent those loans are, like they're probably not terrible interest rates.
Yeah.
And so maybe they could just make the minimums and then get the collections wiped out, or build up the savings enough to where they could start to negotiate with those credit card companies.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like, you know, when we talk about debt consolidation, like, and we just worked with someone recently who we, you know, talked about debt consolidation with, and there's 2, so I think we should mention this. There's 2 free resources that are like official. So like people can go to them and actually get like a free counseling session for like debt management, which potentially could be helpful for this person. So it's the FCAA.org and then NFCC.org. So I think those 2 places would be a good spot for the person could actually get some like someone to actually sit down and like look at their numbers with them to see if like debt consolidation or a debt management plan would even be a good option for them at this point. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.